Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today I'm going to introduce you to Chip Hazard, who's the co founder and general partner at Flybridge, an early stage venture capital firm focused on AI startups with investments like MongoDB and Codecademy. Chip's investment interests include companies building data infrastructure, developer platforms for AI application builders and operators, and AI-infused complex systems. Before co-founding Flybridge in 2002, Chip was a general partner at Greylock, a leading VC firm he joined in 1994. Thanks for coming on the show, Chip.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really nice to meet both of you.
First of all, Chip Hazard has to be the coolest name, by the way, right? That has made.
I am the only venture capitalist with my own action figure. So.
Really? Because that's a badass name, right? That's just like you're a cowboy from like the old Western times. I love it.
Yes, if you Google Chip Hazard, you will find my action figure, which was
Are you serious?
movie Small Soldiers. Yes.
Really? How'd you do that? Like where did that come from?
Voiced by Tommy Lee Jones. I have no idea how that happened.
Dude, no way. Wait, that's huge. So like Tommy Lee Jones voiced. Like, wait a minute, my head's exploding. How did that happen?
So I think the way that happened is when I was in college, I was a ski racer, and I was in a ski race in Mammoth, and I finished, and they call out your name and time, and this Mammoth, generally being frequented by people from Southern California, came up to me and said, "Chip Hazard, that's an amazing name. I need to write that into a script." And so I'm pretty sure that was a script writer, although they would never admit it. All characters are fictional, of course, but I think that might be the history of how I ended up in a movie.
So I wasn't that off base by saying it's a really cool name, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Can I just jump ahead a little bit? How in the world can you figure out what are the companies that could be the next big unicorn? It seems so impossible to figure it out. Like, what's the secret to this, Chip? How does this work?
I'm not sure there's a huge secret, but when we think about investing, there's some somewhat easy to describe, hard to do things we're thinking about. And we think a lot about the founding team, which I'll come back to. We think a lot about the market opportunity that the companies are going after. Obviously, the bigger the market opportunity or a point of view that a smaller market can become a very big market is critical. We spend a lot of time thinking about the why now. And so what is it about the world today this company needs to exist and can exist? And it couldn't exist 2 or 3 years ago, and 2 or 3 years from now will be too late. And so getting that timing right is critically important. And then obviously we think a lot about the product and the depth of IP and how that drives value for customers, whether that be B2B or B2C customers. It's a unique value proposition. But because of the stage at which we invest, there's no data. These are 3 people and an idea. We spend a lot of time thinking about the characteristics of the founders that we're looking to back. And part of it's resume. And so given we invest in the AI world, depth of technical expertise is extremely important. These are not easy systems to build. The underlying infrastructure is still relatively immature in this new AI era. And so you need a really talented technical founder who can navigate their ways through a very dynamic and shifting landscape technically. So we like to see that, but you like to see that founder joined with someone who has unique insight, the domain insight, the understanding of the problem, the passion for that problem and wanting to solve that problem. And so the combination of technical expertise and domain expertise and earned secrets that they've developed by studying and understanding a market are really important. And a lot of that comes through on resumes, but a lot of it doesn't. A lot of things we're looking for in founders are non-resume items, if you will. First and foremost is that passion. Starting a company is exquisitely hard. So as a founder, you can't be entering into it lightly. You need to really have just this deep rooted sense that you are the only person in the world that can solve this problem, that you want to go after that. And that drive that comes from that passion is what gives you the energy to get through the inevitable ups and downs that you have as a founder. Passion's extremely important to us. That translates into an ability and a willingness to work hard. If you're passionate about something, it doesn't feel like work. There is a lot of time and energy that goes into starting a company, and you need to be willing to put in that time and energy. And that comes again from a deep-seated belief that you're the best person in the world to try to solve this problem. We try to spend a lot of time with our founders and understanding their backstories and their backgrounds and obstacles they've overcome. And largely that's evidence of grit and resilience, the ability to, get told no 100 times and stand up and go at it the 101st time. And so having seen that in someone's background, something like 70% of the founders I've backed have come from sort of non-traditional backgrounds, underrepresented or immigrant backgrounds. And oftentimes that can be one signal that someone has a high degree of grit and resilience and that you're looking for in the founding teams. Then lastly, we spend a lot of time thinking about people who have an ability to do two things. One is what we term internally sort of a Pied Piper. They just have a unique ability to get other people excited about what they're building. And that helps them with recruiting. That helps them with fundraising, that helps them with their early customers. So that exuberance, again, oftentimes has at the core, the passion for the idea is critically important. And then lastly, you'll oftentimes hear founders reflecting on their journey, and they'll say something like, "Oh, I got lucky. I met so-and-so and my company was sort of struggling, and then suddenly I got lucky." And it turns out luck is not an arbitrary thing. Luck doesn't come down from the sky. Luck comes from an open-mindedness to meeting new people, an open-mindedness to new ideas, an ability to connect with other people. And it's through that open-mindedness and those connections that oftentimes opportunities surface for founders, and they are able to a certain extent, create their own luck. And so we're looking for people who embody those characteristics and how they approach the world and how they look to create luck as they're building their businesses.
Chip, is it also, do you have to have this certain mindset? And don't laugh at me and mock me when I say this, but if Brian Wojciechowski came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to partner with me and put up money so I could get like a bed in someone's house?"
Right.
I would be like, "No, that's the nuttiest things I've ever heard in my life." Or same thing with Uber, right? "Okay, Jack, do you want to invest with me? You're going to get into a stranger's car. You have no idea who this person is. And it's like a, Toyota that's 30 years old and it's all broken down, and I'm going to go in there." How is there something in the psyche? Really, is there something embedded the way you think as a VC founder that I'm looking at all what could go wrong, where they look at everything that could go right?
Yeah,
Is that something?
100%. And so and this is something that, quite frankly, I've sort of learned over my career. When I started my career, I would say I was on the margin more analytical. And you can analyze your way out of any venture capital investment. There's always 100 reasons something will not go right. The key to success as a venture capitalist is to, yes, pay attention to those 100 reasons that something can go wrong, but also be this optimistic skeptic and really be able to dream alongside the founders and imagine a world where indeed people will rent out rooms on Airbnb or drive Ubers. You can come together with a founder and you can see that worldview and you can dream the big dream in terms of what something can become. And so that a combination of skepticism married with optimism and a willingness and an ability to think about how the world changes over the course of the next 10 years. If you can marry those two, that's what you need to see in an early stage venture capitalist. Because if you're just wildly optimistic all the time, you'll invest in anything because great founders are great storytellers and you'll get excited about everything. And not everything can be great. But on the other hand, if you're always too skeptical, you'll make no investments and you'll turn down too many great opportunities. So there's this balancing act you're trying to play in your mind. And that's why many venture firms are sort of structured as partnerships. You try to surround that investment decision as a partnership with people who, I have one partner who's a wild optimist, and he can imagine how any company that we see can be great. And so he's a great counterbalance to me because I maybe come at things maybe a little bit more skeptically. And, we were in a meeting yesterday where the roles were reversed. I was the wild optimist and he was the skeptic. You play off each other as partnerships and in partnerships. And that's how you hopefully collectively make better decisions.
Is a numbers game, is that you have to seed a lot of companies and you hope that a few of them are going to really work and realize that a lot won't. Is that part of it?
Yeah, 100%. You'll hear venture capitalists refer to something called the power law, which is a very small number of investments, drive a significant amount of the returns. I'm on the board of MongoDB, which I've been on the board of for 15 years. It was 5 people and an idea when we invested, at 67 cents a share. Today, it's a public company with 5,000 people and nearly $2 billion in revenue and $250 a share. And so it's those kind of companies that are transformative in terms of the impact you can have as an investor in terms of driving returns for our investors. But also, that's the fun part. When you're able to start with something that's small and play a role in helping that become something that obviously is big and enduring is is what we're trying to do. But it is, you make 100 investments. If you have a couple of those, that's a great hit rate. You just need to make sure they really, really do work. The other aspect of being a venture capitalist is you recognize that we have an impact, but we're not the people making it happen every day. When I first started my career at Greylock, one of the senior partners had an expression: "We're the invited guest. We're there to support entrepreneurs. We're there to help them realize their dreams. And if we can do that by being an effective sounding board on strategy, we can be an effective sounding board on product strategy and go-to-market plans and sharing experiences that we've seen from other companies and helping them think about organizational development and how things can change. We can have an impact, and that's what we try to do as board members. But day in and day out, it's the founders, it's the executives, it's the leaders of the company that are really the ones that are making it happen. And oftentimes, our job is to not screw it up and engage deeply on a small number of very important issues where you have those difficult 55-45 decisions that are a fork in the road, and you try to make sure you take the right fork through an intensity of focus and effort on those really important decisions.
I mean, in terms of that importance of your role as being a sounding board, how did you get into that level of intuition, that level of experience? Because you've been a VC since 1994 at least, right? When you joined Greylock. What came before? How did you get into venture capital? How did you make that switch and say, you know what, I actually have a lot to offer to this next generation of entrepreneurs, these founders, as a capital allocator?
So the quick background is I grew up in a small town outside of Boston, went to public schools, ended up deciding to small town, how far away could I go? I went to Stanford as an undergrad, so pretty far away, but also right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And there is something in the water in Silicon Valley where you have this entrepreneurial spirit and bug and sense of an ability to make anything happen in the world that you want. After that, I worked in San Francisco for a couple of years at Bain & Company. I had a chance to get sort of your broad-based business education, if you will. I then left Bain to go to Eastern Europe. So this was right when the wall was coming down in Eastern Europe. I worked for a year and a half in Poland on privatization, and we were trying to privatize state-owned enterprises. But what you really saw in Poland was that the growth and the energy was coming from the entrepreneurial sector. It wasn't trying to privatize a 50-year-old behind the times machine tools company. It was the entrepreneurial energy that you saw in the community that really drove the success, not just across Poland, but also all of Eastern Europe. And so that was sort of an interesting insight. And then I came back to Boston for business school. And when I was coming out of business school, it was right as the internet was kicking off. So I graduated in 94. Netscape, as a sort of seminal moment in the internet era, was released in 94. And I had the sense that there was just huge opportunities where technology could really transform the way we work, the way we socialize, the way we conduct ourselves, both professionally and personally. And so the chance to invest and be part of that was something I was eager to be part of. And I had a chance at Greylock. It was a 29-year-old firm when I joined. They hadn't hired anyone in 10 years. There were 6 partners and me, and so I got to learn the venture capital business from the best in the business. And I spent time with each of the 6 partners and started learning, a little bit about how they each approach the business. They each approached it quite differently, and so trying to combine that into my own point of view on how did I want to operate and how did I want to show up as a VC was sort of my career path. As I think about what sort of positioned me to be a good source of advice and guidance for young companies, obviously over time, a lot of it's experience and having seen patterns and all that. But I would say first and foremost, I'm a particularly good listener. And I think that's probably an underrated skill with venture capitalists, many of whom like to hear themselves talk. And of course, I'm on a podcast doing nothing but talking. But I listen well, and you it's trying to listen for the nuances of what someone's really trying to say, but also when you listen well, you can connect dots from something someone said an hour ago to something they just said to something they said a month ago, and you sort of put them together and say, hey, what I think I hear you saying is X, and how do we think about this question? If you listen well and then ask good questions, part of what we're trying to unlock for our founders is they're incredibly smart and they're incredibly driven and they're deeply connected to their own businesses. But by pulling the lens back and listening and asking those questions, you can help them. Oftentimes, they get to the answer that they perhaps would have, but you're trying to help them get to that answer more quickly in a faster time, because that's how startups win. Startups win on speed. They have nothing else. They have no brand, they have no product, but they have an ability to execute and execute really quickly. And if we can help unlock that in our founders, we're doing them a favor.
It's so interesting. So how does it work behind the scenes when, let's say, Rick and I have this startup? Do we then depend upon the more senior venture capitalists to guide us along the way, or are the startups just on their own?
There's sort of this sweet spot that we like to find in our relationship with our founders. If I back Jack and Rick's new co, and you turn to me and be like, "Hey, what should I do?" Something's gone horribly wrong because I will not have the right answers. At the other end of the spectrum, you're like, I got it. We know exactly what we need to do. Get out of the way. I never want to talk to you again. That's probably not great either. So you're trying to find this position of trust where you can be a sounding board, you can be a source of advice and guidance. But the founder's job is to incorporate all the advice and guidance they get from their board members and their advisors and other investors and their team members and what they're hearing in the market. And they sort of put that together into, here's my point of view, here's the decision I'm making. And then they tend to hold those decisions loosely. So you make it, you run at it, you listen to the data. If it turns out it was wrong, you fix it and you move forward. And that's that speed that I talked about with the founders. It's being decisive, but also being iterative in how you're approaching the world, and doing so rapidly is what allows you to really move forward.
You've been investing in AI, machine learning, this hard tech infrastructure since 2002. I imagine it can get very easy to get caught up in this kind of sci-fi vision of the future. You've always called yourself a pragmatist in terms of how you focus your investing. How do you tell the difference between what sounds too good to be true versus, oh, actually, I can kind of see what it could become?
Yeah, it's interesting. We first started investing in sort of AI-related companies a dozen years ago. And to a certain extent, that might have been too early. We tended to recognize that markets tend to develop from the bottoms up. And if you're going to build an AI system or a machine learning-based system, it starts with data. And so that was part of the hypothesis of investing in MongoDB as a big database company. Like, you needed core infrastructure and technologies that enable people to collect and manage and store and analyze data. So you sort of had a point of view on how a market's going to develop. We then moved up the stack in terms of thinking about tools to help people analyze and run models and the like. And then as the technology matures, suddenly that opens up layers of opportunity at the application layer, which is where we're spending a lot of time and energy today. So you try to think about patterns of how markets develop, how technologies develop, and apply that to a new latest and greatest, if you will. And that mostly is I think a function of just being a student of history from a technology perspective and understanding prior big platform shifts, having invested through the first wave of the internet. I saw how that market developed, having invested through the first wave of the cloud computing era, sort of saw how that market developed. So you take some patterns from history and then you marry that with a unique point of view and then join that on the side with just deep insights that you get from founders and academics and trying to understand what the state of the art is at any point in time and therefore what's possible to be built and created and trying to always, be somewhat ahead of the curve. Obviously, the best ideas are sort of, a little bit early, but if you're too early, you might as well be wrong. It's trying to find that balancing act.
You've obviously seen such a diverse range of founder profiles and, senior level folks, operators in the industry. Do you see any patterns in terms of when they decided to transition functions or industries or roles within a company? What does that decision look like?
We've looked at this and tried to identify, the down the middle founder profile, if you will. And as we look across our portfolio and we look across our success stories, it really is all over the map. There's certainly a cohort of founders that we backed who are building their second company. You love that. They know what it's like. There's actually the bar to overcome to start your second company, because you know how hard it is quite high. And so jumping right back into the fire, and if you're willing to do that, you clearly have that passion and drive for the idea you're pursuing. So second-time founders, they tend to know their way around the block. They tend to have understood the mistakes they've made, and they can learn from that. So there is a bias towards repeat founders, but obviously you can't just back repeat founders because there's a limited pool. We've backed teams right out of academia. We've backed teams coming from mid-sized tech companies. We've backed teams coming from failed startups. We've got the whole nine yards in terms of the background, and a lot of it is of really understanding what makes somebody tick, and what their drive is, and what gives them passion for the idea they're pursuing.
Chip, I wonder, is there a lot where you're like, I can't believe I missed that, and it just eats at you. And the other times you should catch it and you're like, oh my God, this is great. I can't believe it. Everything came together.
Yeah. On the venture capital side, the errors of omission are the ones that really gnaw you, for sure.
Wait, mean that you didn't do it? You didn't like?
Yeah, you saw some great company, or you saw some company at the exact right time. It sort of fit with your expertise. You had an opportunity to invest, and you didn't, and then it goes on to greatness. Because of the power law issue, where there are only so many great companies that are created in any given year, when you miss them, you lose a lot of sleep over those, for sure.
Can you ever shake it off, or no? It's always going to linger a little bit. And
I can name them all. You always remember that. And what you try to do, obviously, is understand, what did I miss? What are my patterns? Do I have biases in my thinking? Do I have blind spots in my approach? And when I referred earlier that I started my career maybe more analytical, and I needed to marry that with more optimism, I would say my recurring theme earlier in my career was looking at things maybe a little bit too analytically, and I would analyze my way out of some good decisions. So you need to take those moments to reflect and introspect on how you get better, and how you improve, and what you need to change. That's an important part of continuing to develop. And the fun part about the venture capital industry is, and why I've been doing it for 30 years, is that every day is different. This is not a boring job. There's always a new founder who's going to come in and express a vision for the world that gets you super exciting. There's always a new technical trend to learn about and stay up to date on, and there's always a new problem at a company. You'd think, having served on probably close to 100 boards at this point in time, that I'd be well versed in all the potential problems, but there's always a new one, and so that's what keeps it interesting. But that's what also keeps you learning, and keeps you, continuing to advance your own thinking, your own mental models to apply to the next new situation.
Can I pick on you a little bit and dig into it? Are there one or two names that stand out in particular that might be a part of your kind of anti-portfolio?
Oh, sure. As I said, I remember them all. So one that sticks out in the Boston area is a company called HubSpot, which most people have probably heard. So I met Brian Halligan. I actually knew him when he was at PTC, and he goes back to MIT to get an MBA. And I met him right in his end of his second year. He was talking about, I'm trying to build this thing to help people build websites, and that sounded exquisitely boring. And what I failed to see there is that Brian is just a complete winner as a guy to drive a company forward. I had not met his co-founder, Dharmesh, who's very talented technically. I missed just how good a team they were. And what good teams do is that they take that initial idea and they bend it, 30 degrees to the right or the left. And they bent that initial idea 30 degrees to the right or left. And suddenly it became something that was quite interesting. But by then, we had passed on the investment opportunity and missed it.
It seems like part of the skill required to be a venture capitalist is you're hearing all these pitches, and maybe some of them are bummers, right? How do you think about going beyond how the company was pitched and what it could become? That seems to be kind of the moral of the story from HubSpot.
It's a great question. And our job, if we receive 100 pitches, we'll say yes to, call it one of them. That's not entirely accurate statistically, but you say no a lot. You probably can't necessarily try to dream on every company. But what I try to do with every company that we meet is end the discussion with a comment, something like, I'd love to hear your bigger vision. How do you think about how this changes over the course of the next 10 years? help me dream alongside you. And so a set of questions along those lines help me tease out from the founders how they're thinking about the world. And to the extent they're like, well, I'm doing this, and then I could see that leading to something that's somewhat related, and then that could lead to something different. You can see a really thoughtful strategy to climb the first part of the mountain and then climb the next part of the mountain and then climb to the top of the mountain. And I like to give founders the space to lean back and talk about how they view the world developing, how they see their vision developing. And the ones who've put thought into that, you're like, wait, I want to spend some more time with them. It may be that their second act actually really should be their first act, or it may be that you really like the sequence and you hadn't thought about the second and third and fourth steps of that sequence. So what I've learned over the years is that trying to give myself the space and the founders the space to sort of talk about that big vision is critically important to unlock that, is there more potential or not?
I don't know if you feel comfortable saying this, but are there any ideas that you would say like, oh my gosh, here's some really good ideas for somebody who wants to start it. I'm not interested in myself in doing this, but like, hey, these are just themes, like certain areas that, hey, if you're really passionate about this, I think this is fertile ground, go with it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you learn as a venture capitalist, we are generally one step removed from the problem space. And so my ability to identify a specific opportunity is probably, quite frankly, somewhat limited. And so at any point in time, I may have great ideas, but I will be, to a certain extent, borrowing from the last 10 ideas I heard from amazing founders. I'm not sure I'll be the best insight. That said, we do try to think thematically, like, again, where do we think the world's going? And so if you think about the AI world, obviously the huge transformation post ChatGPT in November 22, suddenly it unlocked this art of the possible of what generative AI could do. And to date, a lot of the early success has accrued what we consider to be the core foundational layers. So the compute infrastructure, companies like NVIDIA, the foundational models, the open AIs, the Anthropics of the world. And there's an inordinate amount of money that's flowing into that base layer. From an investment perspective, we look at that capital and say that's going to be used to advance the state of the art extremely rapidly over the course of the next few years. And you saw this in the early days of the internet, where a lot of capital flowed into the core infrastructure, building out the network layer, building out the server infrastructure. And that's what enabled people to build enduring application companies on top of all that advances. So when you look back on the internet and you say, what are the big companies? It's the Googles and the Amazons of the world that built on top of that infrastructure. So we're looking for companies trying to build innovative end user experiences on top of all the AI infrastructure that's being built. That could be rethinking a business to business use case and how do I, fundamentally transform how jobs are done within enterprises, deploy AI agents that can actually do work as opposed to just like managing workflows. We're really excited about the role that AI can play to transform the B2B application environment. And then similarly, what we call AI native applications where people are just, to use your Uber example from earlier, the reason Uber could exist because suddenly everybody was walking around with a GPS chipset in their pocket. Before that, it couldn't exist. Well, now everyone can walk around with an AI thing in their pocket or an AI thing in their cloud. And so what are those new end user experiences, consumer experiences that are created? We're really keen on founders who are thinking really differently about this huge new technology enabler and what that's going to allow them to create based on their understanding of the market and problems that exist in the world.
I appreciate that insight because I think right now there's just so much hype and interest in AI, obviously driven by ChatGPT, but it seems to be more focused on, oh, well, I have to get involved with NVIDIA somehow, or it's just these big players. As you're identifying these kind of secondary, these more closer to the consumer layers, are there other things that maybe folks should think about in terms of professionals that are looking to get into the industry? Kind of what signals do you see besides the passionate founders and the grit that they demonstrate that maybe a professional should be on the lookout for?
So part of the lens that we can provide is, how does an average venture capitalist sort of think about the world? And obviously, if you're thinking about joining or starting, obviously a lot of those founder characteristics that I talked about are super important. And you'd want to see that in yourself as a founder or in the founder of the company you're thinking of joining. We spent a lot of time from an investment perspective thinking about a few issues that are very AI specific. So the hardest part in today's world, what's the source of competitive advantage? There's a lot of companies we see taking advantage of all the infrastructure that I talked about, but they aren't necessarily advancing the state of the art. And so it's quote unquote a thin wrapper on an open AI or some AI system. Or they have an existing product and they've put a little co-piloted into it to make the end user experience a little bit better. Those are unlikely to be sustainably differentiated in the long run. As the skills required to build those kind of applications become more easily accessible, anybody can build those. And so we're looking for things that are on the margins harder to build. We're looking for things where people have really been deeply thoughtful about how the AI interacts with humans. And so this human AI interface is on one level somewhat of a nebulous concept, but there's an aspect of trust and engagement and delegation and how do you build an application that understands that this AI is to a certain extent going to be sort of thought of as a coworker. And so how do I trust my coworkers? How do I delegate work to my coworkers? How do I double check that they're accurate? People are really thoughtful about the nature of the interface between the AI that's doing things on my behalf. And that's still a pretty nascent area where I think the really smart founders are thinking very creatively about how they build trust and drive engagement and increase the ability to delegate tasks to AI systems. And then data plays a huge part as the other big source of differentiation. Do you have proprietary data that allows you to have AI systems that are able to perform in a way better than the generic off-the-shelf models? How does your system generate more data that you can then use to make it even better? So thinking about data moats and what are the data network effects is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. Those are the somewhat non-obvious areas that we think about as we're looking at new investment opportunities. And if I was looking to join a company, I'd be thinking about as well.
As an investor, as a board member to a lot of these companies in this space, are you seeing certain trends in terms of profiles where they're looking to hire, where they can't get enough of the role? Are they primarily looking for these machine learning engineers, these data engineers, these data scientists? Or is it something beyond these top three names that we all think about?
There's certainly probably unlimited demand for those roles, for sure.
Right.
One of the things we see across a lot of our application layer companies is that they're seeing great success in taking people who would be your classic, very smart, quote unquote, full stack software engineer or backend engineer and applying and putting them into a role that's sort of applied AI engineer. So it's how do you leverage all these technologies that are now available or in the open source community and put them together in a way to create a compelling application, compelling end user experience. And really great software engineers are able to come up to speed on, and yes, there's a slightly different way of thinking. AI systems are completely non-deterministic. And so you have to build a bunch of guardrails and evaluation frameworks and other things into your system. But a really good systems thinker, a really good software engineer can make the transition into becoming a really good applied AI engineer. So that's certainly an interesting opportunity. And then all the other aspects of company building are incredibly important. It may be even more so in the AR as the core technologies become more mature. The advantage is going to be the companies that are really smart about marketing, really smart about go-to-market, distribution strategies, and the opportunity, I think, for people in that realm is not how do I be really smart about my go-to-market motion, but also how do I infuse AI to make my go-to-market motion more efficient, to make it better. And so we're also drawn to companies that are not only necessarily building AI, but leveraging AI to build a more efficient company on every dimension. And the practitioners in the sales world, the practitioners in the marketing world, the practitioners in the customer success world that are up to date on what's possible to leverage the latest and greatest technologies to be better at their job and more efficient at their job I think they'll have a leg up there in the market.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious, I'm speaking to an elder statesman of investing, of venture capital, of AI, of this technology. Are there questions that I should have asked you that our audience should know about, should benefit from?
One of the funny stories that happened to me recently, I gave a talk on AI to a few hundred people, sort of a generalist audience, if you will. And at the end, one of my friends came up and he said, Chippy, it was interesting. You talked about all these industries that are going to be disrupted and you didn't talk about your own industry.
Yeah, lucky you, right?
That's right. So we're all unique, snowflakes. Like everyone else, there's an opportunity for disruption, but not the venture capital industry. So we're spending a lot of time thinking in the AI world about how do we use it to make ourselves better? How do we support our portfolio companies better? How do we use it to make better investment decisions? How do we use it to identify founders that we don't know that we should know? So part of being a founder of a venture capital firm, yes, I'm an investor, but I also need to think about our business and how do we make changes to the way we operate so we can continue to be relevant and an important player in the industry going forward.
So smart. That's funny. I really appreciate this walkthrough in terms of what we can learn from your experience as a venture capitalist, because you don't have to be a VC, you don't have to be an investor to really benefit in terms of this practical knowledge. So thanks for coming on the show, Chip.
It's super nice to spend time with all of you, and thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, Chip. This was great. This is really informative. I think for the audience, they're not a real. So this is some really good stuff for them to say, hey, wait, maybe I could get into the VC area, or maybe I'm going to make some investments. So I think this is awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it.
That's it for The Blind Ambition. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and a review. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.